How do you spur someone on to want something even more? Tell them they can't do it. This is Behind the Button. Hello and welcome to Behind the Button, the podcast that really lifts the lid on what goes on behind the scenes in the world of pay. I'm Laura Murphy, I'm the CIPP's content editor, and I'm delighted to be joined today by the person who became the UK's first payroll partner, and that is Maria Mason. Welcome to the show, Maria. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Laura. I'm absolutely delighted to have been asked. I'm always happy to work with the CIPP and delighted to be here to be talking about one of my most passionate areas, payroll.
So on Behind the Button, we like to ask our guests on the show to leave a question for the next guest. And the one you've got is all around sort of branding. So if payroll wasn't called payroll, what do you think it should be called?
I think the word payroll comes or has in the past had quite negative connotations. I think generally, people never notice the great work. They only notice when something goes wrong and it's in there. And I think until more recently, the profile of payroll was always much lower than it should have been. It was not deemed to be a high level expertise role. And so I think if I was looking at it now and somebody said, rebrand that, I'd probably give it something like rewarding, because I think for me, payroll isn't just about paying salaries anymore. We have to deal with everything from pensions, all of the benefits, etc. And I think that has a much more positive connotation to the person getting not their pay, they're getting their rewards. They're getting their rewards for the great job that they've done. And then I also think, wouldn't it be lovely to say, I work in a rewarding industry? Yeah. I think that's more where I think it needs to be. I'd like it to be a much more positive word if we were looking to rebrand that actually gave the dynamics of what the industry is today, because I think it's very different to when payroll was first branded to where it is today. Yeah,
and that's really interesting you should say that, Maria, because at the CIPP we've recently changed our strategy. So it used to be leading payroll professionals, but we've changed it to incorporate all pay professionals. And that's in recognition of, how it has changed, how there are loads of jobs that sit on the periphery of payroll maybe that still impact people's pay at the end of the day. So it's really good to see that sort of that idea is thought throughout industry. So thank you for that. And I just wanted to ask you really, Maria, what is a payroll partner? So for anyone listening or watching today who might not know what that means or what it entails, could you talk to us a little bit about what that involves?
Okay. We didn't really exist. Payroll was sort of always put within the accounting industry where partners are. I think it was very much deemed that it was sort of a taxation, but a lower sort of side. And I think, and so you never had payroll partners because it wasn't deemed a big enough area of the business to warrant or a level of expertise that needed that specialism that was in there. And that was one of the reasons why I went to BDO, because for me it was important to be able to change that. These were the people that were fully responsible for all the taxation and all of the advice and the great work. And so for me, it was about actually taking that payroll profession into an accountancy firm, but actually looking at it very different. So I always said, we're a payroll bureau inside an accountancy firm. We're not accountants delivering payroll. We're delivering it at the highest level using technology, etc. So for me, a payroll partner is somebody that stands at the head of the stream within the firm, is responsible for the delivery of that, and not just internally to our clients, but externally, ensuring that people understand the importance of what we do. So I see my role as being that person who goes out and makes sure that people understand what it is that my team can deliver, and the wide range of elements that we cover. Because as you say, payroll isn't just about payroll processing anymore. There are so many elements that are involved. So it's about being able to diversify that and be able to work with others within the business to enable us to deliver to the highest level to our clients.
Yeah. And, we're talking about how payroll is perceived now, But I want to dig into a little bit more about your background, Maria.
Yeah.
So you are an inspiration to anyone who's looking to join the payroll industry or who already works in the industry, and also to women. And I just really want to take it back to the start. So what was your first job in payroll?
First job was for a very large IT, it was an IT consulting company that payroll and HR was a very big part of. And for me, I definitely chose payroll. I know we talk about people that fell into it, and I do understand that. But for me, I wanted to work for a very large corporate. I was 20. I'd worked in a solicitor's before as a legal secretary, and I really wanted a role that could give me a career, something that actually, you know, I didn't go to university, I hadn't done those things. And so for me, it was, I need to build something that gives me a brand, actually gives me a technical capability that I can use throughout my career. And so when I found this company, for me, it was very much, well, actually, I could work for a very large corporate, and that was something I was very interested in. I'd worked for a very small family company, and I wanted to work for that large corporate, to have a chance to do a number of different roles, to be given different experiences. And I knew that was going to be more likely in a much larger company. So when I joined them, and they didn't want, in them days, you were working on mainframes delivering payrolls, and so they didn't want people with payroll experience. They wanted to train you in the way that they wanted you to work. So that was great. So they were going to give me a technical capability, and they very much believed in qualifications, people being skilled. I was one of the youngest, because we were all classed as consultants, that they'd ever taken on. And so for me, it was about, and I think that was probably the drive that's always gone, break the boundaries, you know, challenge the norm. So I was the youngest in there, and I was the youngest manager when I was first promoted. And so for me, that gave me the drive. But they didn't care about age, experience, time served. It was what you deliver. And that's a mantra that I've brought into our business and the roles I take today, because I think that made me incredibly ambitious, incredibly driven, and it enabled me to take on so many different roles. So within that business, I was there 13 years, but I had done everything from implementation, payroll manager, account manager, sales person, global sales. And, you know, I was the first person to ever sell a global payroll in that business. So for me, that gave me the opportunity to gain such a multitude of skills, and they really believed in qualifications. So that's where I got my foundation degree. I felt it was wrong to ask other people to go and, you know, get qualified if I hadn't done that myself. So there I was with a 6-month-old child, taking on the degree, looking after a team of 45. And they gave me every opportunity, but they rewarded, recognised when you worked hard. And they probably gave me a lot of the ethos that I've taken into that sort of management area in my business today.
Yeah. And I noticed there we talk a lot about ambition. And I know that we were given sort of a rare glimpse into your personal life recently when you joined in with the #MakingPayroll personal initiative. And it was really nice to see sort of that side to you. And I noticed that you mentioned that your daughter has fast-tracked to be ahead of year. So my question for you around that really is, do you think watching you chase your dreams, be fiercely ambitious and go for your goals has influenced your daughter in her career choices?
Oh, without a doubt.
I
see so much of myself in there. And I think my parents, who had me and my brother very, very young, and are still together now, 55 years on, and amazing people. And we didn't have a lot of money, but what I did have was an immense amount of love. And my parents were always very like, you know, it doesn't matter where you come from, what you are, you determine your destiny. And I just remember thinking nothing is off the table. And they gave me so much confidence in that, and that was always what I wanted to do with my daughter. And I, like every parent, live with so much guilt as being a working mum, because I was back to work 3 months after my daughter was born, and I remember living with the guilt. And I've learnt now, she's, you know, coming up to 27, that actually that guilt just doesn't go away. You always feel, it's like imposter syndrome with your children. You always feel that you're not doing enough. Are you doing it right? And what I learned was, even though I was working, what I was demonstrating to her was that, you know, you can have both. You can have a great family life and you can have a great career at work. But yeah, it takes a lot of focus. It takes a lot of hard work. And that meant some nights I wasn't there. Then my husband then had to pick that up, and he's been an amazing support throughout, and certainly when my daughter was younger. And I think, but what she always saw was somebody that was really hardworking but still gave her time. So the time we did have was very quality, but she knew that, you know, I worked, and I can assure you now she's reaping the benefits of all of that. When we take her on holiday and things like that, she's loving that. But she's seen that, and I think she's seen that drive. And we were always, I don't care what you want to be, I don't care what you want to do, but you have to want to be the best at that. And she's the most amazing secondary school teacher. And I watch, and she's a head of year, a deputy head of her subject by 26. And so amazing. I look at her and watch her, you know, try and deal with, you know, 15-year-olds and things like that. And I wouldn't take that on, hundreds of them. And she absolutely adores it, and they adore her. And I think, you just have to strive and know that there is no boundary. Whoever you are, whatever you do, you determine where you go. Other people should never do that for you. Yeah. So, yeah.
And you mentioned there, you know, sort of juggling home life, work life and studying when your daughter was 6 months old. What is your best piece of advice for somebody who might be listening or watching today who is finding it hard to juggle multiple balls or, you know, balance multiple plates? What is your one sort of key tip that you could give to them?
I've always been very passionate and always been very driven and always looking at that bigger picture. You know, when I joined BDO, it was I need to be a partner, and I want to be a partner. I want to prove that I've got a voice and I'm a great businesswoman and I deserve that role. Yeah. So I've always done that. But the thing that I've always taught myself is to give myself small milestones, because sometimes it can feel lonely. Sometimes it feels you're failing in all parts. And so for me, it was, I sort of gave myself milestones in every part of my life. It was those small things that you can tick off and feel that you achieve. And I do it now, where I write lists for everything. And so, because there are days I think, what have I done today? And yet, you know, it's 8 o'clock and I'm thinking, what have I actually achieved? And so it was about giving myself small milestones. So it was, you know, when it came to doing the next part of the degree, it was like, right, okay, I've got this weekend and I want to be able to at least put down what I want it to be. And it was as simple as that, just giving myself very small milestones in every part of my life. You know, it was if I'd taken my daughter swimming and we'd done 3 activities, that was a great milestone. You know, I'd booked that, I'd sorted that. And so I found that the more organised and the more I didn't keep beating myself up and just said, do things that you can achieve and you'll get to that bigger thing at the end. But you sort of forget, you look at the bigger thing and you forget the things that you need to do to get there. So I'd always say to somebody, give yourself small milestones, give yourself lists. Tick off those things, and everything should be on that list, because the sense of achievement when I've gone through 5 things on that list is much better than the day that I sit there and I didn't write one and then you think, what did I do?
Yeah, and I think within that, Maria, you know, it's that piece about being kind to yourself. We are our biggest critics, but celebrate those small wins and take them. So I think that's a really good motto for people to try and apply in their lives. So sort of from small milestones to big achievements, obviously there have been quite a few in your career, but if you had to pick one single achievement that you're most proud of, sorry, I know it's a difficult question.
It's really difficult.
But would you be able to share that with us today and why that is your biggest achievement?
I think the biggest achievement was graduating, getting my foundation degree. So somebody who'd never been to university, and going through that and watching people in graduate programs go through a lot quicker. I'd worked for a very big corporate, so you saw that happening, and then feeling that, you know, had I missed something and was I good enough to do that? To then go through that and to go through 3 years whilst I was maintaining a full-time job. And I remember partway through, about, I think it was starting year 3, I'd moved into a sales role.
Yeah.
And they'd sort of said to me, you don't need it. You don't need it, Maria. You're here now. You know, you don't need it. We don't need you to have that. And I just remember thinking, no, I've worked so hard. This isn't about what you need. This is about what I need. I need to do this, and I need to be able to achieve this. And regardless of whether you think it's relevant for the job that I'm doing, actually, I think it's relevant for me. And so then to keep persevering in a very new role as well, that was obviously, you know, very intense and very pressured. It was a sales role. I hadn't done that kind of role at that level previously. To then graduate. And I remember, you know, being with my husband and my parents when I graduated and just going up them stairs. And it sort of makes me feel emotional now, but going up those stairs and getting that and thinking, you've done this, and you've done this yourself. No one else has done this for you, and you are capable. And I think that was a big thing for me to go, nothing is not achievable. If you work hard, you can achieve anything. And then watching my team now and watching some of them, I went to the graduation last year because we had 3 of the team that graduated, and to watch them collect theirs and remember feeling as passionate as I did about my own with these guys, knowing how hard they'd worked. I think, yeah, that's the thing that sort of still resonates now and still makes me feel emotional, because I'd done it against all adversity and achieved it. And that to me says that nothing cannot be achieved.
And that also brings me on to something else that I've heard you speak about before. So when you said you wanted to be a payroll partner, I believe you were told that you couldn't be because you weren't an accountant.
Yeah.
But here we are today, and you are a payroll partner. Yeah. So first of all, tell me how that made you feel. And then, you know, how did you then go about getting into the role that you're in today after being told that initial no?
I think when I went, and, you know, I didn't understand, because to me it was, when I'd interviewed, it was, I had a fantastic background and a very, you know, trusted background of growing payroll bureaus, and that was what they wanted me for. And I thought, well, if I was an accountant and I'd worked for any other accounting firm, I'd automatically go in under that. So, and I've got qualification, everything that you measure on, I've got this. And so, but I remember them sort of saying, oh, you know, it's just not what we do. We don't have anyone that's a specialist, a technician in that kind of role, and coming into that role if you haven't been a partner before. And I just remember then, it goes back to that ambition, is don't tell me no, because that just makes me more driven. And then it was actually, you could, and I do love a challenge, you could change this whole industry. You could change by showing that you can grow a great business. It can be incredibly profitable, that payroll has a place in accounting firms, and a very strong place, that you can be a leading and valued stream. And actually, you're probably one of those voices that could do this. So, yeah, this is not a no. This is, I'm going to show you, and I'm going to make it impossible for you not to give me a partnership, because I'm going to have all of the figures that you need. I'm going to have the revenues. I'm going to have the profit, and I'm going to have the profile. And then it will make it impossible. So when it did happen, it goes back to that challenge, and where you said, you know, it's another area that makes me incredibly proud, because it wasn't just changing it for me, it was changing it for everybody else.
And within that, Maria, you've spoken about changing your language when speaking to, you know, senior leadership. Yeah. So for anyone watching today or listening, can you give us a bit more around how you go about doing that? So when you say you change your language, what do you mean by that?
What I mean is, generally, payroll people always will, we're deliverers. We're deliverers of, and we pride ourselves on delivering accurate payroll. We understand the emotive nature. We understand what happens if we don't do our jobs right.
Yeah.
And we see that firsthand. And, it's devastating. Payroll people have to be driven like that, because of the nature of what we do. And so what happens is you tend to find that when they are speaking, it's very much on a very emotive and a feel. So it's, I feel this is happening. I feel this is right. I feel this should happen. And of course, when you're dealing with C-suites, with partners, etc., they don't care for your feelings, and not in a negative way, but that's not a business decision.
Yeah.
You cannot make a business decision based upon feel. You make business decisions based upon facts, figures, results. For me, I teach people in my team, but also when I'm mentoring, about the kind of KPIs, and to going into the C-suite talking, we used to run this amount of pay slips, we're now running this because we brought this efficiency in. We are running at this level, these are our accuracy rates. These are the things that we do, and bring in other stats in. So then suddenly it becomes very difficult when you're in a senior position to ignore that.
Yeah.
And so you're talking that language that they understand. People don't understand what we do. And so there's no point talking about processing the payrolls and doing, no one cares. They just want that end result. So you need to talk in the results and what you've achieved. And that is generally when you get heard.
Yeah. And I notice as well within that you spoke about coaching people.
Yeah.
So have you read any books or seen anything that has resonated with you in terms of coaching and leadership styles?
I do love the entrepreneurial people, the Richard Branson, the Alan Sugars, all of the big ones. I like all of that. I like the factor. And if you read anything of theirs, it is very much about not accepting, boundaries, not being told you cannot do things. So I sort of probably resonate very strongly in that arena. And I think everyone just wants to be treated fairly, with respect, to be recognised and to be rewarded. And if you can do that, I think that you're covering the most fundamentals for an individual. And so to me, that means that we have the most loyal and hard-working team, and that's enabled us to be as successful as we are. So,
Yes. It's clear to see how passionate you are about your team.
Yeah.
And I did witness a really special moment.
Oh, don't get me going on that one. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
So at the CIPP's Annual Excellence Awards, you won an award yourself, which you were happy about.
Oh, I love an award. We all know. Glassware, love it.
But it was your reaction to one of your team winning an award that stuck with me.
Oh, it sticks with me now, even now.
Yeah, there were happy tears.
Yeah.
And it was lovely to see you support your team and, praise them as you did. So tell me about how that felt, watching your team member go up and accept an award, knowing that you had led them and nurtured them within your team.
I think, this one is very personal to me. And I know she won't mind, because she's one of the most open, one of the most beautiful person I know, inside and out. So Jess was diagnosed with breast cancer 2 years ago, literally it happened just after the CIPP conference. To go through that, somebody who was so open, literally the moment she found out, she called me. Her team knew she was going to the hospital, because she's an open book and had told everyone. And people had started to call to say, we haven't heard from her, we haven't heard. And she phoned me and said, it's definitely cancer. And I said, okay, what do you want me to do? What do I need to do? And she said, I need you to tell the team. They're all calling me. And I was like, are you sure? You need to get your head around. No, you need to do that for me, Maria. I need you to tell them. So then having to tell the team. And she is such an inspirational leader that the minute that happened, the team, you just saw 50 people just all come together as if it was stronger than a family. It was, you saw these people and they were like, right, what do we need to do? What do we need to do to support her? And to watch my team and these individuals behave the way they did, was spectacular. And that's when you knew you had something really special, that this wasn't just about a team. This was a family of people that took everything that happened. And then you realise how close everyone was and what a great team that we had built. And then to have gone through that journey with Jess through chemotherapy, radiotherapy over that period of time, and then a double mastectomy and all of those things, and to watch a person who during chemotherapy would be calling me going, right, anyway, let's do a Teams call, let's do this. And I'd be like, Jess, no. And she'd be like, I need it. I need work. I need a distraction. And I think we were probably as important for her as she was for us at that point. And there was a person, I think, in all honesty, during all of the treatment, probably had only had 6 days off.
Wow.
For all of that, for over a year. But I knew she needed work. So obviously I had to support in a way, because I needed to stop her working and to get better. But I also knew how much she needed it. And so to work so closely with her and to watch this person still performing at the highest of levels, and the support of the team, you know, the whole team done the cancer run and all of that. Just to watch a whole group of people come together and to watch this most inspirational lady just behave in the most, through one of the most difficult scenarios, to behave with such bravery and such openness and honesty was one of the most special things to watch. And so obviously we became close in that. So then to watch all of that, and then sitting on that table knowing that she was up for an award, and you know, in my eyes I'd have given her, you know, hundreds of awards during that time, because the fact is, the work, if you looked at her level of work, you would never have known. You would never have known. You wouldn't have even noticed that she wasn't full on, and you know, she was going through the hardest battle of her life. Yeah, a very special night.
Yeah. And you mentioned there as well, you know, the payroll family.
Yeah.
And I think payroll as an industry, we do all club together.
Yeah, definitely.
We all help each other out. You can ask a question on LinkedIn, for example, and you're inundated with people just wanting to help out. And I think we really need to shine more of a spotlight on that and that family feel that, you know, the community has.
Absolutely. And I've never, ever refused anyone. And I've had all types of people reach out saying, Maria, I really loved when I saw you at the workshop, you know, would you be able, I'll give anyone any time. If you're really serious about moving forward and things, I'll happily give you my time, because I think it is so important to give back. And I think it's so important that when, you know, I'm very fortunate that we do things like this, so I have a voice in the industry, and I think it's so important that when you do, that you're giving back and that you are bringing that next generation on, because I think to have been in payroll for such a long time, but to actually see that probably the last 5 years have been the most pivotal in where payroll is currently sitting. I don't want to lose that. That is everything I've worked towards, and I don't want to lose that. So it's so important that we're giving back, bringing that next generation forward, giving them the support to help them to, you know, raise their careers and to, you know, to move forward. And I think I see that as my responsibility, not only with my team, but outside in that profession, because if we don't, I don't ever want it to go back.
And you've mentioned about the younger generations as well. And I think one of the things we need to be doing, as I said, is shining a spotlight on the community. What else do you think we can be doing to get that new wave of workers interested in an industry in the pay professions?
I think one of the ways that we sort of, you know, I suppose sell it in there, I've recently taken on, and I've done this throughout my entire career, people like data analysts. They're not payroll people at all.
Yeah.
They've come out of uni, they've got some really good qualified, really bright, dynamic individuals. And I'm like, do you know, I can train payroll. I'd like to say it's a very logical process. So you can train that. what you can't train is that dynamic. And I think payroll isn't just about processing. The reason our team is so successful and, you know, gets great profits and things like that is because of all the technology, the fact that we're not afraid of change. We're not afraid of using that technology to enhance what we do. So we use everything from robotics, tools for checking, you know, all different ways of ingesting data. Payroll goes wrong with the transfer of data. So if you can minimise the amount of manual intervention, you can get much more accurate payroll. So I need those kind of people in my team because they're the ones that embrace technology. They have the most amazing mindsets into being not going, we've always done it like that. And I get that all the time. I go in as an advisor to clients' payroll teams and get told, you know, well, why are we doing that? Well, I don't know. We've always done it like that. And you're sort of going, but hang on, that's not getting us from A to B. You're going through all of that. Like, why are we doing that? But no one really knows. They were just shown to do it like that. And payroll, you don't have a lot of time to make change. You go in, you're paying every month, every week. There's very little time to make change. So, of course, from that perspective, it's really then difficult to be able to embrace that. So I like to have people of all different backgrounds, all different levels. And so what we have in our team is we do have payroll processors, and everyone who comes into our team has to start in there because they have to be a technician. They have to understand, how does payroll work? What is the process? Because you cannot be somebody that can manipulate change and do things in there if you don't understand the fundamentals. So we make sure they have the fundamentals, so they're all trained in there. But then they go off. So we've got people that are data analysts. We've got people that are working with tools where their job is to go and look at payrolls that are not performing at the highest level. And it could be how we get the data from the client, how we ingest that data, how we're checking it. So we brought in different tools that enable us to check 120,000 lines of data from what was ingested to what came out in the payroll in a matter of seconds. So then we're not checking, you know, 15,000 pay slips. We're going down to the pure things of, you know, 1,000 pay slips that don't match. And so it's about using that and thinking of it differently. So I think that's how we encourage. Payroll isn't just about processing. It's a very small part. I think I've had an amazing career. And actually, the payroll processing part, I don't like to say that I'm probably not the best at that. I'm great at big numbers and really good at processing very large numbers. But those smaller payrolls were not my thing. But being able to do a multitude of roles within the payroll profession, from an implementer, a payroll manager, an account manager, a data analyst, all of the different jobs that I did has enabled me, an advisor has enabled me to gain those skill sets to determine where do I go in that environment. So yeah, we've got advisors that are going in helping other clients that have got their payroll in-house to be the most efficient in what they do in their own processes. So taking what we do out to our clients to improve that. And I think that's how we encourage it. We go away from that, it's about processing payroll. That's such a small part. If you're running a payroll business, that's just one part.
And I also think as well, you know, technology, I feel like it's advanced loads. I know that you're a big fan of using technology and the power of technology. So what do you think are going to be the next big technological changes for payroll in the next, say, 5 to 10 years?
I think we will see a lot more. AI, I think, definitely has a place. There's no doubt about it. We can't ignore it. And I love it. I love it for communications, for things like that. And we've built internally, because obviously the clients and the confidentiality, we cannot use chatbot and things like that, but we can use, and we built our own. So we have personas. And what we've actually done is we now have champions in personas within our team, and they are building a payroll part of that. So we're constantly asking questions and we're giving it knowledge. So then we can build it. So then the team go into the payroll team personas to then be able to ask. So we know that we get a consistent approach with what we're dealing with it could be issues. How do we explain like shared parental leave to someone in a simpler way, you know, that kind of thing. So what we're doing is building the library of those kind of elements in there. So I think it definitely has a place. am I sure that we can get, because we've tried it, a bit of AI in there with some of the processes that we do, and I think it can help. But I think people sometimes confuse AI with robotic processes as well.
Yeah.
And a lot of payroll is around the more RPA elements, the robotic process, rather than the AI. The intelligent part comes at the end. But I think from that, I think robotic processes are an absolute must. And I think that is where we certainly have made huge savings in time in the processing of multiples of payrolls. And I think that's where we're going to see a lot more of that, because we're seeing a lot more demand for API, which is not really prevalent in payroll because of the nature of how payroll works and the sensitivity of the data. So taking from multiples of platforms. But I think those things are becoming more and more sophisticated, so will be utilised more. So I see a lot more in that kind of robotic process arena, and we're seeing more payroll tools come in, which is great, because for I think a long time there wasn't a great amount of investment in that area, and we are seeing that, and they're coming with much more. So we're currently implementing a system that would enable us to be able to process bulk payrolls with a one touch, based upon whether they've got changes in their payroll or not. So it's about using the technology efficiently. So I think we're definitely seeing it, and it's great to see it in the payroll arena, because I think for a long time we didn't. But I think it's definitely coming, and so I think it will be amazing going forward on there.
So I think we're in agreement that technology is going to have a monumental impact on the industry, but are there any other areas you think we'll see big changes in over the next few years?
Yeah, I think we've seen a lot, and I think even if you think back to when the furlough scheme was introduced, and it was just expected that payroll were going to deal with that, and yet it was very much around contractual impositionings of your staff members to determine whether they were entitled. But it was a natural thing that if anything has something to do with somebody's pay, that must be payroll. So I do think there's going to be bigger demands, and because we're seeing a massive change, there's more bigger benefit packages coming in. You know, think people are changing how they pay their staff, so it isn't just about salary anymore. It is about those better benefit packages and broadening that out. So I think payroll people are having to become much more than just payroll people. They're having to become pay technicians.
And I think that brings me on to another point, which was that, you know, we still unfortunately do hear that HR and accountants are almost seen as being sexier than payroll, for want of a better word. How do we move away from that?
I think that's changed, I think, to be honest. And I do think it goes back to the language that we use in payroll and what we give back to the business. So if you're delivering great results and you're delivering great reporting back to your business, then your value goes up. The more that you drive those business decisions, the more impact you have. So the more sexier you become, because you've got a worth. And so I think if we can then support those areas, then we become as interesting as they do. If we're seen to just be administering, no one cares. If you're seen to drive and to be delivering the results that the business wants, and you're seen to be delivering information that is relevant, that can help to drive that business, you have a seat at that table. And that's what payroll people need to do. They need to be making sure they're delivering those types of reporting. They're actually being able to look at what's in their system and what can they give, and look at those analytics. And those are the kind of things that get you a lot more interest and get a voice, because you're working with fact. So as soon as you work with fact and you're delivering on fact, people will listen.
I've heard you speak before as well about this golden process. So can you talk through that a little bit for our audience and what that involves?
I think it's so important on that golden process, because I think it is so easy, and the amount of times I hear payroll people when I go in as an advisor and things like that, where they're saying, oh, you know, why do you do it like that? Well, we've always done it like that. And so what I always try and do, and when I'm looking at any kind of problem, is go, okay, if we started again, do not think of system restrictions, do not think of who has to have what. If you were coming in today and I asked you, how would you like your payroll to run? How would you like it to look? Let's start with that. And that becomes your golden process. Then you're able to map what you have currently to that golden process, but then you're able to see your gap. So when I first went into BDO, it was, well, actually the process there, but how do I get that well, hang on, if I get a new task management system that actually tells my clients when they've got to deliver their data, and then actually tells the payrollers when they've got that fits that box there. So what did I went to all of our software providers that we were working with and said, are you able to give me that? One of them said, yep, I can do that for you. And so what you started to do was you were able to plug the gaps that you didn't have in there, or your systems didn't do. It enabled us to look at our systems as well, to go, how much of the system we're using. And pretty much everywhere I go, they've got this great system and they're using about 20% of it. So it's about going back. But if you don't know what you want your process to look like, then you can't fill those gaps. So I always talk about that golden process. Find out, if you were starting again with no restrictions, what would you want it to look like? What would be the most efficient way for you to get to an accurate payroll at the end? And then you can start fitting what you've got and finding the gaps. So that's what we call that golden process, understanding what you want it to look like if you didn't have to deal with what you had today.
Yeah. So it's taking it right back to the start, looking at what you've currently got, and then how do we get to where we want to be?
And then fill in with what you've got, because a lot of people go, oh, we can't do that because the system can't do that. What they mean is no one probably understands within the business if that system can do that, or it was originally programmed to do it in a particular way. But actually, could we use, and we've brought in additional software that we might use to plug the gap that we know that payroll system can't do. So it's about thinking differently. But if you at least understand what you're looking to achieve, that's the golden process. Know what you want to achieve, start again, and then plug where you have, know where your gaps are, and then determine how you fill those gaps. And that gets you to that amazing golden process.
Well, thank you for that, Maria. I'm now going to ask one more request of you, if that's okay. So we would like you to put a question to our next guest on Behind the Button. Do you have a question for us today?
I think, for me, the question would be something along the lines of, what would you want your payroll legacy to be? What would you want to be known as when you've walked away?
No, I think that's really insightful, and I can't wait to put it to our next guest. So
excellent.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us today.
No, absolute pleasure.
If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to hit subscribe or follow Behind the Button on your favourite podcast app. And if you're watching on YouTube, tap the like button, drop us a comment, and make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode. We've got plenty more great guests coming up, sharing their stories, insights, and honest conversations about life behind the button of payroll. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.